My name is Oliva D. Castillo, and I'm 40 years old. My older sister stole my business while I was in the hospital, then told my son, "I'm your boss now. Your mom isn't coming back." So I destroyed her. Sup, Reddit. My sister Trent used to laugh at my restaurant idea like she'd just delivered the final word on economics, and she did it with that same polished confidence she wore like armor in every room. I'd spent years as a kitchen person in Athens, Georgia, the kind of worker who could run someone else's restaurant with my eyes half closed, while Trent built a real estate career and treated me like I was just the help. I kept my head down, worked hard, and saved up so I could finally open my own comfort food spot. The kind of place where people felt taken care of, not squeezed. March 14th, 2018. We were sitting in my kitchen in Athens, and I slid my business plan across the table to her like it was a peace offering. My Family Kitchen, a southern comfort food place on the east side of town. Good food, fair prices, treating people like human beings instead of profit margins. My father taught me that, and his father taught him, the family way. Trent glanced at my numbers for maybe 30 seconds, then pushed the folder back like it was contaminated. She said it was cute, but I wasn't a businesswoman. I was a line cook with delusions of grandeur. I told her I'd been running kitchens for 15 years. She said running kitchens for other people wasn't the same as flipping burgers and signing checks. She leaned back, arms crossed, and asked if I wanted her to invest. Then she said she'd have better odds lighting the money on fire. I told her I wasn't asking her to invest. I asked if she wanted to be part of something. She smirked and called it a failed project, told me no thanks, said she had real investments. Trent was always like that, 3 years older, always convinced she was the smart one. She made decent money in commercial real estate and developed a God complex about business because numbers went her way more often than they didn't. What she never admitted was that she'd needed me when she was desperate. Back in 2015, Trent came to me with a sure thing strip mall development and begged for $40,000 to close the deal. She promised she'd pay me back in 6 months with interest. I gave it to her. I signed a promissory note she drafted herself, and I watched her drive off like she was doing me a favor by accepting my money. My father called it helping family. When I asked about repayment later, Trent called me petty. 3 years later, I'd seen maybe $8,000. Payments came when she felt like it. Sometimes she'd skip 6 months, then send $500 with a text saying, "More coming soon." The strip mall did fine. She just didn't prioritize paying me back, because family money isn't real money to people like her. So when she called my restaurant a failed project, I didn't argue. I filed her words away like I filed that promissory note, documented, waiting. I thanked her for the input. She told me restaurants fail, 90% of them, and I'd burn through my savings and come crawling back asking her for a job. She said it like she was doing me a kindness. Then she checked her watch and left, as if she'd just saved me from myself. Telling my parents would have been pointless. They would have asked what I did to provoke her. I sat there looking at my business plan, at the logo my boyfriend had designed, a simple fork and knife crossed over a farmhouse, My Family Kitchen printed underneath like a promise. My son Noah was 12 then, and he'd been listening from the hallway. He stepped out and said Trent was kind of a jerk. I told him to watch his language, but he wasn't wrong. I opened the restaurant in October 2018 on an SBA loan and a second mortgage. Everything we'd saved for 2 decades tied up in one risk. If it failed, we weren't just closing a restaurant, we were nuking our whole life. The first year was pure survival. 14-hour days, 6 or 7 days a week, me in by 5 in the morning, my boyfriend doing the books after Noah went to bed. Noah worked weekends, bussing tables and running the register until his hands looked like he lived in a dish sink. There was a stretch where payroll felt like a coin flip. I stopped taking a salary. My boyfriend picked up extra work. Noah took a paper route. We didn't break. The brisket sold itself, the regulars multiplied, and while the place slowly found its footing, I kept my records on Trent's debt, Every payment, every missed deadline, every excuse, documented, quiet, waiting. By the time 2020 hit, the second mortgage was gone. By 2022, the SBA loan was paid off early. By 2023, we were doing numbers that still felt unreal to say out loud, the kind of revenue that makes other restaurant owners stare, because in this industry, you don't usually get to breathe. You just survive until you burn out. We weren't just breathing, we were winning. And I'd kept records of Trent's debt the whole time. Every payment documented, every gap, every half-hearted, more coming soon. She still owed me $26,400, and the promissory note had an acceleration clause sitting quietly in paragraph 7 like a trap door. I never triggered it. I just kept the paperwork current and waited. Because with Trent, you don't fight loud, you fight clean. Success has a way of calling the people who doubted you back to the table. Local papers started writing about us. A feature here, a best comfort food list there, customers tagging the restaurant on social media like it was their secret spot they suddenly wanted credit for discovering. And then Trent started calling more often, like she'd always been around, like she hadn't called it a failed project and laughed in my kitchen. She'd drop by just to check on things, linger in the dining room with that approving nod like she was a judge inspecting a thing she funded. She started making little comments about branding and scale and missed opportunities, as if she was already mentally moving her pieces onto my board. February 2023, she finally said it out loud. I want in. We were standing in the parking lot, dinner rush about to start, deliveries coming in, servers clocking on, the air already smelling like brisket and onions. I asked her in on what, like I didn't know, like I needed her to say it again. She gave me a pitch: partnership, capital, connections. She said we were leaving money on the table. She said with her help, we could expand and professionalize and turn this place into a real brand. I laughed, and her face tightened like she didn't understand humor that wasn't under her control. She asked what was funny. I told her she called this a failed project 5 years ago. She said she was wrong and could admit that. I asked if she could admit she still owed me $26,000. Her jaw locked. She said that was separate. I asked how it was separate when she'd been living like my money didn't count for 8 years, then showed up the second my restaurant did. She tried to shift into that old angle, the one she loved because it made her feel superior. She said I was a kitchen person, not a businesswoman, and she'd handle the business side. I told her no, hard no. She stared at me like I'd spoken a language she didn't understand. She said I didn't get to refuse her when she was offering help. I told her she didn't get to ignore me when it was risky and show up when it was profitable. I told her the answer was no, and I meant it. Something changed behind her eyes. She didn't yell, she didn't plead. She did that tight little smile people do when they hear no but translate it as not yet. She told me I was making a mistake. I reminded her of her own words, my funeral, right? She walked away, but the air she left behind felt colder. That night, my mother texted me. Trent says you embarrassed her. Nothing about context, nothing about the debt, nothing about how Trent had tried to waltz into a business she never built. Just Trent damage control, as if my job was to make sure her feelings stayed intact no matter what she did. I worked the dinner rush anyway. The brisket sold out by 8. Regulars slid into their usual booths. Noah moved through the dining room like he'd been born there. Older now, sharper, watching everything. That was February 2023. I should have known it wasn't over. People like Trent don't accept boundaries. They treat them like challenges. And I could feel her recalculating, looking for the angle that would crack me open. She didn't want partnership. She wanted access. She wanted control. And she didn't believe I'd actually keep her out. August 2023. I collapsed in the kitchen during Tuesday lunch prep. 1 minute I was in the walk-in counting tomatoes, mentally noting I needed to call our produce supplier about Thursday's delivery. The The next minute, I was on the floor with Jamal yelling my name and someone pressing a cold towel to my forehead, while another voice kept saying, "Stay with us, Olivia, stay with us." It wasn't dramatic like the movies. It was quiet and terrifying and fast. Heart attack. Not massive, but serious enough. 2 stents at Athens Regional, 3 days in the ICU, 6 weeks minimum of no work, no stress, no physical labor, no running a restaurant, no exceptions. The doctor said lifestyle changes so many times, it felt like a countdown clock on everything I'd built. My boyfriend handled logistics while I lay there staring at ceiling tiles and monitors. Jamal stepped up as acting manager without hesitation. He'd been with me since month 3 of opening, knew the kitchen blindfolded, knew every vendor, every staff quirk, every problem before it became a crisis. Noah was 17 by then, had been working the floor for 2 years, knew every regular by name and half their life stories. Between the two of them and the staff who'd survived the lean years, the place could run. I believed that. I had to believe that. Trent showed up on day 2. Concerned sister act, polished to perfection. She brought flowers for my boyfriend, yellow roses, his favorite, which meant she'd either done research or asked someone. She sat in the chair beside my bed and asked about my recovery with a tone that almost sounded genuine if you didn't know her. She pitched helping out while I recovered, said family had to step in during emergencies. I told her Jamal was acting manager, my boyfriend handled the money, Noah ran front of house. She wasn't going anywhere near the restaurant. She smiled that tight smile again, nodded like she agreed, like she was hearing me, while translating it in her head to not yet. Dad called later that night. First question wasn't how I was feeling or what the doctor said. It was whether Trent was helping. That told me everything. I texted Jamal and my boyfriend from the hospital. Trent has 0 authority. If she shows up, ignore her and tell me immediately. They both replied the same way. Got it. The first week wasn't fine. Trent showed up anyway. She sat in a booth with a laptop like she was auditing the place, asked staff questions with that tone people use when they think authority is implied, introduced herself to customers as helping run things while I recovered. Jamal told her flat out she didn't work there. Trent came back the next day at open and stayed past close. Week 2, she started rearranging things, moved the host stand to what she called a better traffic flow position, blocking the sightline to the daily specials board I built with my own hands. Changed the table numbering system because hers was more logical, confusing servers who'd memorized the layout for years. Then she told Jamal to change the brisket recipe, said it was too heavy and needed to be lightened for modern palates. Those were her exact words. Jamal told her no, said the recipe was mine, customers loved it, and nothing was changing without talking to me first. Trent got cold and said she'd discuss it with the owner, like she meant someone else. Noah called me that night, told me exactly how she said it, like she was already imagining herself in the role. I called Trent from my hospital bed and told her to stay out. She ran the optimizing operations routine, said Jamal was defensive because cooks get attached. I told her people drove from Atlanta for that brisket. She said maybe that was the problem, that we'd gotten stagnant. I told her if she showed up again, she'd be trespassing. She didn't stop. Week 4. Noah called me at 11:07 p.m. I remember the time because I was staring at my phone when it rang. He told me Trent called a mandatory staff meeting after close, fired Isabel in front of everyone, said she was underperforming and resistant to change. Isabel, who'd been with us since 2019, worked her way up from dishwasher to line cook, fastest hands in the kitchen, never missed a shift. Her son had just started college on a scholarship she helped pay for by working doubles every weekend. Trent made her turn in her apron in the dining room. Then Noah told me Trent said I wasn't coming back, that my heart attack was worse than anyone was admitting, that she was taking over operations for the family. Jamal quit on the spot after Trent demoted him in front of everyone for undermining leadership. And then Noah said the part that broke something open in me. Trent made him stand up, walk to the front of the room, and shake her hand while she talked about professionalizing operations and moving past the amateur phase his mother had created. My 17-year-old son used as a prop while my sister tried to bury me in my own building. I told Noah not to confront her, not to do anything that night. I told him I was going to fix it. Then I told him to back up the security footage, everything from the past 4 weeks. He said it was already done. He'd been downloading copies since week 2 because she'd been too interested from the start. 17 years old and already thinking 3 steps ahead of a grown woman who thought intimidation was strategy. I hung up and called my lawyer at 11:30 p.m. When I explained what was happening, his voice went cold and focused. She wasn't on the LLC, not on the bank accounts, not on anything. She was just a person pretending. He told me it was fraud and she'd caused real damage. He told me to document everything and asked how badly I wanted to hurt her. I thought about Isabel crying in the parking lot, Jamal walking away from a kitchen he loved, Noah standing there shaking Trent's hand while she lied about me dying. I told him as badly as the law allowed. Noah brought me the external hard drive the next morning, still in his work shirt, eyes tired but steady. 4 weeks of footage, time-stamped, organized by date. Every move Trent made once she decided my hospital bed was an opportunity. I watched it all from the couch, heart still sore, body weak, mind sharper than it had ever been. Trent telling vendors she was authorized to make decisions during a medical emergency. Trent berating line cooks about portion sizes that didn't need changing. Trent firing Isabel while Isabel stood there stunned, apron in her hands, surrounded by coworkers who didn't know whether to speak or breathe because the woman giving orders had told them the owner was dying. Then the staff meeting. I watched my son forced to stand up and walk to the front. I watched Trent grip his shoulder like a proud executive, smiling while she talked about professionalizing operations and moving past the amateur phase I had created. I watched Noah's face as he tried to disappear into himself, tried not to react, tried not to give her the satisfaction of breaking him. 17 years old, controlling his emotions better than his aunt ever had. I watched the clip twice. Then I called my lawyer back. Paperwork moved fast after that. Cease and desist to Trent, sent certified and by email. Formal notification to every vendor that she had zero authority. Written notice to the bank flagging any attempt by her to access accounts. Written notice to the landlord. And a trespass notice effective immediately. Trent was legally banned from the property. The restaurant was no longer a gray area she could exploit with confidence and volume. It was clean, clear, closed. She left me a voicemail that night, pitching the story she'd already decided on. She said she'd been keeping my restaurant alive, that I should be thanking her, that involving lawyers was cruel and unnecessary. I didn't call back. I didn't need to. She didn't believe it anyway. Of course she didn't. People like Trent never believe rules apply to them until someone enforces them. She showed up the next morning at 11, walked through the front door like nothing had changed, like paperwork was imaginary. She started giving orders to the prep crew. Noah was working the register. He saw her come in, watched her start talking, and did exactly what we discussed. He called me. Then he called 911. Then he stood there calmly, waiting, while his aunt slowly realized she'd miscalculated. Athens Clarke County Police arrived in 8 minutes, 2 officers. Trent tried to argue, tried to show them something on her phone, tried the family misunderstanding angle. They asked for proof of authority. She had none. They walked her out through the front door in front of the entire lunch rush. 50 people watching, forks frozen midair. The door closed. Orders kept coming in. Life went on. She called me from the parking lot, still visible through the front window. She told me I'd regret this for the rest of my life. I told her to talk to my lawyer and hung up. My parents called later and said I was vindictive for involving police, that Trent was just trying to help, that family doesn't do this to each other. They never asked about Isabel, or Jamal, or Noah. Trent didn't stop there. She tried calling vendors directly, telling them the cease and desist was a misunderstanding. They hung up on her mid-sentence. She tried to post on the restaurant's social media, claiming I'd had a mental breakdown after my heart attack and was making irrational decisions the family would soon correct. She couldn't access anything. I'd changed every password the night Noah called me. She tried filing an emergency motion in court, claiming partial ownership based on sweat equity and implied partnership. The judge dismissed it in 48 hours. There was nothing to document because she'd never built anything here. I should have stopped there. I didn't. I wasn't finished. I remembered the promissory note, the $40,000 from 2015, the $26,400 she still owed. Paragraph 7, the acceleration clause she never read. I told my lawyer to trigger it. Full repayment, 30 days, no negotiation. That's when she finally panicked. Trent called me screaming the day the demand letter landed. She didn't start with denial. She started with outrage. How dare I treat a loan between sisters like an actual legal obligation? How dare I involve lawyers in family business? How dare I be so cold and calculating over money she said we both knew she'd pay back eventually? I told her the loan had nothing to do with the restaurant. It had everything to do with the fact that she still owed me $26,400 after 8 years and had defaulted more times than I could count. She said she didn't have that kind of cash lying around. I told her she had 30 days and to talk to my lawyer. She tried to turn it into a story about revenge, about me being bitter, about me punishing her because she embarrassed me. She said I was destroying her life over old paperwork. I reminded her that paperwork is what keeps people from stealing things that don't belong to them. She hung up on me. Called back 10 minutes later crying. I didn't answer. She didn't pay. She couldn't. Her real estate income had been sliding since the pandemic, and I suspected what she showed the world was held together with credit cards and optimism. The kind of person who leases a luxury car while her checking account hovers near zero. I filed for judgment in October. The court reviewed the promissory note, the payment history, 8 years of missed deadlines, bounced checks, and excuses. There was no defense. The judge ruled in my favor. $26,400 plus interest plus legal fees. $31,847 total. I filed for wage garnishment in November. Every paycheck Trent earned after that, 25% came to me. The sister who laughed at my failed project was now funding it, one forced deposit at a time. I won't pretend that didn't feel good. I checked my account on the 1st and 15th like clockwork, watching her money arrive without a single word attached. Then Isabel filed her complaint. Wrongful termination, fraudulent misrepresentation. Trent personally named. Isabel showed investigators the messages Trent sent about new management expectations. They watched the footage of the staff meeting where Trent announced my death like it was a press release. The Department of Labor didn't treat it like a misunderstanding. They escalated it. Criminal investigation. Trent's name started circulating in places where reputation is currency. Commercial real estate runs on trust. Once people decided Trent couldn't be trusted, deals dried up. Management contracts vanished. Partnerships dissolved quietly. One by one, the calls stopped coming in. A former business partner messaged me on LinkedIn and said he was dissolving their partnership because he couldn't work with someone capable of what Trent had done. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Her income dropped fast. Between the garnishment and the fallout, she was bleeding money. I heard through distant relatives that she sold her BMW, that her wife filed for separation, citing financial instability and breach of trust, that she was looking at apartments because the house payment wasn't sustainable anymore, and the bank was sending letters with words like default and foreclosure in bold red print. My parents went quiet after that. Quiet like people who picked a side and watched it lose. I didn't feel sorry for her. She tried to steal my life while I was in a hospital bed. She humiliated my son. She fired a woman with a kid in college because she didn't get her way. Consequences don't become cruel just because they arrive all at once. June 2024. Noah graduated from high school. We closed the restaurant on a Saturday night and turned it into a private celebration, the kind of night that felt earned. Isabel made her tres leches cake, 3 layers, fresh whipped cream, the kind that makes people close their eyes on the first bite. Jamal was there too. I rehired him in October with a raise and the title of kitchen manager, and he'd walked back into that kitchen like he'd never left. The people who built this place showed up. Staff, regulars, the ones who stayed when things were hard. My parents walked in halfway through dinner. I hadn't invited them. I hadn't spoken to them since September, since they'd called me vindictive and cruel for holding Trent accountable. They stood in the doorway like they belonged there, like their presence was something I should be grateful for. The room went quiet in that way people get when they know a moment is about to turn. My mother's eyes were already red, tears ready, practiced. My father had that tight expression he wore when he was about to lecture me about duty and family responsibility. I stepped toward them before they could get further inside. My mother said they just wanted to be there for Noah. I told them they weren't invited. My father raised his voice, said we were family, and I couldn't ban them from their grandson's graduation over some business dispute with my sister. I stepped closer and told him to stop calling it that. I told them Trent tried to steal my restaurant while I was in the hospital recovering from a heart attack. That was fraud. My mother said Trent made mistakes, that everyone makes mistakes. She said Trent lost everything, her business, her marriage, her home, and was living in poverty because I wouldn't forgive her. I told her I showed mercy by not pressing criminal charges and by not suing for damages. What they wanted was for me to pretend nothing happened. My father said they wanted their family back. Sunday dinners, holidays, siblings speaking again. Noah stood near the cake table, frozen, Isabel's hand on his shoulder. Jamal was already moving closer, reading the room. I told my parents Trent made choices and I was refusing to erase them. My mother whispered that I was being cruel. I told her good. The man they raised would have rolled over to keep the peace. I grew up. I looked at Jamal and asked him to escort them out. He stepped forward, calm, present. My parents looked at him, then back at me. My mother begged one last time. I told them to leave. They did. The door closed behind them and the room stayed quiet until one of our regulars started clapping. Then another. Then the room breathed again. I went to Noah and apologized for them crashing his party. He looked me in the eyes and told me not to apologize. He said they came to guilt me in public and that was manipulation. He said forgiveness isn't access. 18 years old, and he already understood what took me 40 years to learn. We cut the cake, the party continued. I went home that night lighter than I had been in months. Not because I won anything, but because I stopped carrying other people's choices. 3 days after Noah's graduation party, Trent showed up at my house at 6:30 in the morning, right as I was locking the door to head in for the breakfast shift. She was parked at the curb in a beat-up car, nothing like the BMW she used to drive, the one she bought during the years she said she couldn't afford to pay me back. She got out when she saw me, followed me down the driveway like she was afraid I might disappear if she blinked. She asked for 1 minute, just one. I stopped and turned around. Up close, she looked smaller somehow, thinner, clothes hanging loose, dark circles under her eyes like sleep had become optional. The confidence that carried her through every room her whole life was gone. What stood in front of me was desperation, stripped of polish. She said Mom and Dad told her what happened at the party, how I kicked them out, how I said I was done with all of them. I told her I was done being manipulated. If they wanted to call that being done with them, that was their choice. She said they were trying to fix things, to bring the family back together. I told her ambushing me at my son's graduation party and asking me to pretend she didn't try to destroy my life wasn't fixing anything. It was rug sweeping. She gave me an apology she'd clearly practiced, said she messed up, said she lost everything, her business, her marriage, her house. She asked how much more I needed, like consequences expired once they became inconvenient. I told her consequences don't end just because you're tired of experiencing them. She begged, standing in my driveway at dawn, begging for another chance. I told her she wasn't my sister anymore. She was someone who shared my DNA and tried to steal my life while I was at my weakest. I told her maybe someday I'd forgive her in a way that didn't affect my daily life. But forgiveness didn't mean trust. It didn't mean access. It didn't mean she got to be part of my family or my business or my son's future. She destroyed that herself. I laid out the terms clearly. The wage garnishment would continue until every dollar was paid. The trespass order was permanent. If she contacted me again, I'd file harassment charges. If she showed up at my house again, I'd call the police. If she tried to contact Noah or my boyfriend, I'd pursue a restraining order. Non-negotiable. She stood there for a long moment, staring at me like the version of me she used to control was gone for good. Then she got back in her car and drove away. I haven't heard from her since. I haven't heard from my parents either. 8 months of silence. No birthday cards for Noah, no holidays, no checking in. The people who lectured me my entire life about the importance of family disappeared the moment family stopped benefiting them. That told me everything I needed to know. People ask me if I regret cutting them off. If I lie awake at night wondering if I was too harsh, too cold, too unforgiving. I don't. Not once. The restaurant is still winning. We did 1.8 million last year. Margins that make other owners stare. A second spot is in the works if permits clear. Same food, same rules. Noah's learning the numbers and working weekends. He wants in, and I'm fine scaling as long as we stay people first and the brisket recipe stays locked. Last month, Trent finally finished paying the 2015 loan. The final transfer was $847 on a random Tuesday. No message, no apology. I printed the statement and framed it next to our first dollar on the wall. She called it a failed project. Tried to steal it while I was in the hospital. Learned what receipts are for. Life is quieter now, cleaner, built on consent, not obligation. Blood doesn't equal loyalty. Forgiveness isn't access. And some doors, once closed, are meant to stay that way. People assume the end of a story like this is loud, that there's some final confrontation, some dramatic reckoning where everyone finally understands what they did wrong. That's not how it works. The real ending is quiet, almost boring, and that's how you know it's real. After Trent disappeared from my life, after my parents went silent, the days didn't collapse into grief like everyone warned me they would. They opened up. Mornings came without dread. My phone stopped feeling like a live wire. I could eat breakfast without bracing myself for a message that would ruin my appetite. I didn't realize how much of my energy had gone into managing other people's emotions until there was nothing left to manage. At the restaurant, the atmosphere changed in ways I didn't expect. Staff laughed more. Tension I hadn't even noticed before was gone. Isabel moved through the kitchen with confidence again, her shoulders relaxed, her jokes back. Jamal ran the line like a conductor, steady and precise. Customers noticed too. They always do. When the people behind the food feel safe, the food tastes better. It sounds ridiculous until you see it happen. Noah changed as well. Not in some dramatic, overnight way, but subtly. He stood taller. He spoke with more certainty. Watching his aunt try to erase his mother while using him as a prop had flipped a switch in him. He started asking better questions. Not just about the restaurant, but about people, about boundaries, about what respect actually looks like when it isn't wrapped in family language. One night after close, while we were wiping down counters, he told me he didn't want to be successful if it meant becoming someone like Trent. I told him success doesn't corrupt people, it reveals them. Every once in a while, someone from the past would test the silence. A distant cousin would message something vague like, "Life's too short," as if that sentence carried wisdom instead of pressure. An old family friend would ask if I'd heard from Trent lately, their curiosity dressed up as concern. I learned not to explain. Explanations invite debate. I answered with one word, no, and let the discomfort sit where it belonged. The second location started moving from idea to blueprint. Permits took longer than expected. They always do. I didn't rush it. I wasn't building out of fear anymore. I was building because it made sense. Same concept, same food, same values. No partners who needed managing, no relatives who felt entitled to outcomes they never worked for. Just clean lines and clear roles. Late one evening, long after close, I stood alone in the dining room and looked around at the place that almost got taken from me. I thought about how close I'd come to losing everything while lying in a hospital bed, trusting that the people around me would respect what wasn't theirs. That trust didn't come back. Something better replaced it, discernment. I don't hate Trent. That surprises people when I say it. Hate requires energy, and she doesn't get any more of mine. I don't wish her well or ill. I wish her honest consequences and the clarity to learn from them. Whether she ever does is no longer my concern. That chapter closed the moment she tried to write herself into ownership with my absence as ink. As for my parents, the silence taught me something I needed to learn late. Love that only exists when you comply isn't love. It's control with better branding. I mourned the parents I thought I had, not the ones who showed up at Noah's graduation party, demanding access they hadn't earned. That grief was real, but it passed. Truth has a way of settling things. Some people lose everything and learn nothing. Others lose people and finally learn everything they need to know. I didn't destroy my sister. I didn't tear my family apart. I stopped holding together something that was rotting from the inside. And once I let it fall, I had room to build something that could actually last.